And 3, 2, 1. Good evening and welcome to Thursdays with NAMI. My name is Peg Morrison. I'm the Director of Programs with NAMI North Carolina. That's the National Alliance on Mental Illness of North Carolina. Thursdays with NAMI is our way of building community, building conversations around mental health. I'll be your host tonight. September is National Suicide Prevention Month. Suicide is a leading cause of death for young Asian Americans. Tonight we are highlighting Chinese American culture and mental health. Our guest tonight is a psychiatric nurse and nursing instructor, as well as a leader in youth mental health. I'm eager to hear her insights on the topic. More about Lily Chen later. As usual, the first part of our show will be an interview, a conversation with our guest. About halfway through, we'll show our video of the week, and then we'll take your time and your questions, virtual studio audience. So thanks for being here with us. First, a word from our sponsors. Thursdays with NAMI is funded in part by the, okay, I'm pausing because our logo should be showing right now and I am not seeing it, by the North Carolina Division of Mental Health, Developmental Disabilities, and Substance Abuse Services through the Federal Mental Health Block Grant Fund. This is just a little choppier than usual, bear with me. Oh, there we go, there's that beautiful logo. We appreciate their guidance and support. Again, the NC Department of Health and Human Services, Division of Mental Health, Developmental Disability, and Substance Abuse Services. So thank you to that organization. Moving right along, Thursdays with NAMI is recorded. If you have a friend or acquaintance who couldn't be with us tonight, forgive them. Let them know it's not too late. We believe in second chances at NAMI, and a recording of tonight's program will be available on our YouTube channel in just a week or so. Now, without further ado, Lily Chen is the coordinator of the United Chinese Americans Youth Mental Health Initiative. She's also a nurse educator who has taught at the University of Iowa, University of Illinois in Chicago. She is currently a full-time instructor at North Carolina Central University. Welcome, Lily.
Thank you, Peg. Thank you for inviting me to the show, and thank you, Gary, who is the executive director, and showing, nice to meet you, and also Ms. Poet. And thank you so much for connecting me with NAMI. So I'm excited to be here to share just some personal stories as a mom and also as a community leader. I should be a psychiatric nurse, but I'm not, and I'm going to work for it. So I'm glad that there are a lot of students in the show as well. So I hope that you will not get bored listening to me sharing my stories. So should I introduce myself, like a background a little bit, or should I?
Sure, go ahead. That was one of my questions. Okay. Just tell us your story. And NAMI is all about stories and family connections. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So I grew up in Guangzhou in China, and that's a southern city right next to Hong Kong. So if you heard about Cantonese food particularly, and that's where I came from. So I am a native Cantonese and Mandarin speaker. So I speak 2 languages, and then I came to the United States as a graduate student and got my master's degree in University of Iowa, May 11th. May 11th, 1991, and got married the very next day.
Wow.
With my husband I met, yeah, no time to spare. And we are, we are on a journey together, having 5 kids, and next year is our 30th anniversary. So my kids were talking about getting us some gift to someplace, I'm not sure. We might just going to Asheville because of COVID, but have been very blessed with 5 children in my family.
Well, congratulations on the anniversary and on the large, wonderful family. So, all right. How are you taking care of yourselves these days? It's a challenge with COVID-19.
It is. Like I just shared with earlier that I'm very glad that I moved to North Carolina from Chicago, cold weather. And I love the weather here and the people. I love my students, my job, and how do I take care of myself, doing something meaningful. I think that I always love teaching. I always wanted to help other people, and also uh, general things like exercise, go to bed early. Like I just went swimming today. And also just take some, like right now I lock my door so that none of the family can come in, some quiet time. Uh, like doing something that you without, as a mom, worry about everybody else. Is like, okay, I'm just doing my thing, just leave me alone. So I think that, yeah, that's how I keep myself healthy. I think that we have to, as nurses, I think we need to preach, we need to do what we preach. Really, I think it's very important for mental health as well. A lot of outdoors. I love outdoors.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is a wonderful state for enjoying the outdoors. I'm in the same boat. I love to get out there and explore the trails.
Uh-huh.
So I was interested in your connection with youth mental health. You've got a leadership position there. Was there a story to how you took that role, or about that personal connection?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I always tell people that if I know, if I knew what I know right now, I would have been a much, much better mother. And
Mm.
I raised my 5 children. We had a very, very little in China, even I was a nurse in China already, but we have very low health literacy general, let alone mental health.
Mm.
The mental health in China is a lockdown uh, hospital with the severe mental illness with schizophrenia people. I remember just people screaming all the time and all that. So even as a nurse, we didn't have mental health in our curriculum actually, as nursing or community health. So I had to take 2 classes in community health and psychiatric health. So so in summary, I knew very little about mental health before I came to the United States, and then I took those 2 courses and I became a nurse and I started education still. I think that it was not related to mental health. I think what really started to get me realize the issue is I started to work at school district as a classroom nurse in Naperville School District. And I worked there very part-time while raising my 5 kids. I said, well, my kids in school, I might well just, work at school part-time.
Mm.
So I remember one time I was working in a high school, and one of the high school, and there are several kids got into the issue or problem with fine using drugs outside the school before the school start. So all of them, of course, were in the health office, and there's just one kid who's Asian American kids, Chinese, Korean, I don't know. He was just shaking uncontrollably. And then he was just saying, my mom's going to kill me. My mom's going to kill me. So, so it really made me feel very, very sad that I think the other kids were like, not a big deal. And this kid, just that amount of fear and kind of shame as well. A lot of reasons for that. And then also, as I started to get involved with the community work, like maybe 6 or 7 years ago, and then there are a lot of parents approach us, 5 or 6, can't remember all the time, just like blurb right now. But anyway, so just approach us that, this is a need, and it seems like a lot of children were under a lot of pressure from school, from family, or society in general, and suffering in silence, basically.
Mm.
So we started then 2016, we had the first Chinese American convention organized by United Chinese Americans, a national nonprofit, nonpartisan organization for civic engagement, youth development, and culture. So we invited for the first time, then we had a mental health section, invited Dr. Josephine Kim, who is a faculty member at Harvard, came to talk to us about mental health. I remember that section, people were just wouldn't want to leave. The things that she said, I have never heard before. It's just so much knowledge, and also make us realize how much we didn't know. And so that was the start, the 2016. So 2017, then we had a second conference in Chicago. That was in DC. That was the first, like, just mental health conference for the entire day in Chicago. So we had 250 people flying in. I mean, most of the local people, there are people from California, from out of state, for that conference, because they were saying that there's no other place and nothing in our communities offer this kind of education. So it's called Asian Parents, American Children, is to bridging the communication gap between the parents and the children. And then since then we have, as we have more and more these kind of conferences, we heard more and more. It's just always like, when are we gonna have it next? How can we know? So just this past summer, we have 3 webinars. Actually, we just had one last week too, but that was geared to NCCU students and more geared to the students and college kids. So this summer we have 3. So that's, I don't know if I have talked too much, but that's kind of the involvement, involved. That from communities' needs, and then there isn't any educational, culturally appropriate education or language-wise, and as well as culture-wise.
No, that's very helpful. In my own circumstance, I grew up in an Irish Catholic family, and we did not discuss emotions. We certainly didn't discuss mental health. So that resonates with me, just a taboo subject about which very little, if anything, is known. And then when I discovered NAMI and this language of hope and all these tools and information and just a whole universe that kind of lifts you up and makes structure out of the chaos. It's also how NAMI was formed, parents sitting around a kitchen table, learning from one another and educating one another. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I think it's really about I'm a public health nurse, I consider. So that's really about public education. Like my student would know, there's a primary, intervention, first level of public, disease prevention. So that's what we have been doing, is really trying to educate the community about increase the awareness of mental health, and then also decrease stigma, which is huge in our community.
Absolutely. So tell me, what was the most important tool or step that you've discovered so far that's allowed you to achieve what you've been able to achieve with public education and organizing these webinars?
Yeah, I think that it's really important that you really, like I said, you really wanted to help those who suffer. Those are the, including some of my own children, right? My children's friends and the community members. And so we just felt that like in community health nursing, like I share with students, so what is the need there, right? So as I explain how we evolved and how the huge need there is, then you just felt like you felt like sometimes you felt good that you could help, but at the same time you felt kind of helpless because the need is so huge and the resources and manpower and everything is so limited. So it was really difficult, like every time, when is going to be next? And we want to talk about this and this. And for example, we don't know where to direct our community members to for the helpline that has a language support, right? Or we get so many requests, my child or somebody else's child, do you know any bilingual speaking providers? and there isn't any. And so I think that the need of the community is so huge, and also I think anyone who really care about helping others as well as helping your own children, right? Just like all my kids, it's like they're all my kids, you know, that you just have to kind of do it. I don't really think about like as something that I wanted to do. It's just that you're, you know, you're called to just to do like a parent, right? You just have to parent. You just have to help your own community. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I think that's one portion. And the second portion, obviously, that we have an amazing, amazing community and so many dedicated volunteers who are just so passionate, and also who just really, really help out our own community and realize that need. And as you know, you run programs like those, you know, programs and webinars, it takes so much time, but this is entirely volunteer run. So the dedication and sacrifices, I would say sacrifices your time, because I think every hour we spend serving others, you know, in a way is taking time away from your own family or work, right? So we have to, you know, we're happy to do what we do, but it is the reason I wanted to say that is because it does take a lot of sacrifice, you know, on your own time, or else you know, maybe I should travel or go someplace else. But it's the dedication and really the willingness to the sacrifice for a bigger community that really keep this going, and we're able to do that. And also the third component will be the partners like NAMI, the partners like so many donors who has a generalist donated, or organizations who is a partner, and just everybody who had help. So that was tremendous, you know. That's what I can think about, like how we can keep this program going. And then we still need a lot of support. As you know, this area is really much in need. Just any culture, any ethnic group, and mental health is, it is a big healthcare needs in the nation, especially
It sure
during
does.
COVID. Mm-hmm. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I agree with you. The demand is always there. It's so big, the size of the need and the number of people in need and the capacity to meet that demand. It doesn't instill that much confidence, really. Your comments remind me, honestly, of the NAMI families that I work with, that I hear that call and I see people suffering, and I have the experience, I have the wisdom from my own path that I've walked to go and help and reach out to them. But there is a trade-off. I also want to invest in my own family and be sure that I'm attending to my own relationships. And that's an important piece of self-care.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. But, you know, during the process, I would say we started like a 2016, right? I still, you know, I was just thinking helping others, you know, how everything comes around. I had no idea at that time that I would use those knowledge to help others, to help my own children this past year or two, that, you know, a couple of my kids were struggling, they, for a variety of reasons, you know, in college. So it benefited me personally as a mom as well, that I wouldn't. So that's what I'm talking about. I said, if I knew what I know now, that I would have been a very different parent. I was just, you know, think, oh, really, you're a nurse? I say, yeah. Sometimes I say, yeah, that's right. You know, I don't know that. Even a nurse doesn't know. Even the physician doesn't know. Sometimes, you know how that goes, you know, it's just really, we just very somehow just missed that, just lack of knowledge, and also you know, like a human, I don't know, just for me maybe ignorant. I just didn't know. So it's a continual learning process that benefit, you know, help me to be a much better mother, to be in tune with my children's needs, even though they're like adult right now, but still, you never stop being a mom.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate and admire that you're sharing with us. And I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of what people gain from NAMI is, we talk and we support each other, and we learn forgiveness, that we didn't know what we didn't know. And that's part of being the human experience. That's, yeah, relationships evolve and people evolve, and that's what recovery looks like.
Right. So I do feel that a lot of parents experience a lot of guilt, right? So like to me, to some extent, I do too. Fortunately, I have a wonderful, wonderful children. They're very, very giving. Mom, why are you thinking that? And also, I see my therapist. So I see my therapist like for about a year, a little over a year now, because I felt like I needed to better help my children, myself, and is we just moved to a new place, a new job. It's a lot of things going on. So I think one of the things I would say to the parents is that we really need to have more self-compassion, and forgiveness, not only just to others, but to ourselves too, because it doesn't really help us nor help those we love if we cannot forgive ourselves, doesn't have a self-compassion or doesn't have enough self-care. We really need help and make ourselves well first, get help. I see therapy is not a big deal. Yeah, I need help. I need help. It's a stressful time, and it is great that we're able to get additional help to help us, be healthier, right? So
That's right. That's right. We must forgive ourselves and reject guilt. That's how we build and grow. So wonderful comments there. Tell me about the myth of the model minority, as you were describing the young Asian man who was trembling and crying after getting in trouble at school. Was there a connection to the pressure he felt and the myth of the model minority, do you think?
Yeah, I think there is. This is, again, I thought about this question a lot. Actually, one of my daughters about 5 years ago she was taking a psychology class, and she wrote a paper on model minority myth. I read the article. It was very profound to me as a mom. Like I said, I thought, wow, I didn't even know that and how it affected children. So I think that in the context of children, I think my kids, again, or, their friends, they are expected, as Asian American, Chinese American children, they're perceived as high achiever academically. They're perceived as smart. They are perceived as obedient. They're expected or perceived obedient, and they're expected to be different things, like good at music or art, and you should excel at everything. And then your parents, are very well off or whatever. So, so there are some issues there then, like, we shared earlier, that it is really individual. Each child, individual are their own individuals that is created, with their own strength and weaknesses, but everyone is perfect in God's eyes. They are very unique individuals. So, but when you have these expectations to anybody, or to, in our cases, the Asian American children, then if they don't have a good grade, or they don't play, whatever certain music or whatever, then they felt that they are very inadequate. They're not meeting the expectation, or you're supposed to be perfect. How can you do drugs? So if you do it like the child, then you're going to be condemned, because you're supposed to be perfect. You're not supposed to make any mistake. You're supposed to get all the A's. On the other side of the coin, not everybody, can get A's in any group, ethnic group, right? There's always different level of intellectual ability, just like a physical features, everybody has differences, right? So not everyone equally, intellectual ability is equal. So, and then when they really struggle academically, nobody will pay attention. Well, you're supposed to know this. What do you mean by you don't understand it? I see that in school, right? So they are going to be, on the bottom of the food chain in terms of getting help because, oh, no, we don't need to pay attention to those Chinese kids. They're fine. They're doing fine. And how about the Chinese family, working family in Chinatown? They're very socioeconomically on the lower end of the society as well. And then I know so many kids like in, Chicago, China, they just struggle, no less than just average family or anybody else, because they are struggling economically. They are not rich, by all means. Yeah, we're blessed, we're professionals. They're just like a lot of differences in any ethnic group. So again, when it comes down to resources or stereotype, they say, oh no, you're supposed to be well off, well educated, you're supposed to smart, you don't need any help, and make the children feel so very inadequate. Even though they're inadequate, they feel very inadequate, they feel like it's their fault because they're supposed to be like that, right? Mm-hmm. So that internalize a lot of feelings, how that goes. It's not going to be healthy. And then another component is the model minority, that expectation part. And then another part is that their identity, like I am Chinese coming from China, so I have very solid identity as a Chinese American because I know, I came as an adult. For our children's generation, maybe about junior high time, they question about their identity. I remember my daughter all of a sudden stopped speak Chinese altogether because she didn't want to be different because of her friends in actual elementary school started. And one of my daughters stopped speaking Chinese altogether because she didn't want to be perceived as different. Again, their individual uniqueness is not being, well, they didn't think that they felt like they're different, that's bad, right? Sure. So they're very confused with identity, and that also adds to the extra layer of stress and confusion on them. They don't want to be different, and they internalize any kind of comment about their culture, their eyes, or their, they speak English very good, but their parents might not. So then they internalize everything as if they're not good enough and they are bad or because, or, whatever. And they had a hard time verbalize it, especially younger children. Until my kids, I think until they're in college, they can realize. They take the Asian American studies or psychology class, they realize what it was. Even in high school, they didn't know what it was, but it just diminished and damaged their self-esteem. Because the food they eat, they perceive as not, they're different and they perceive as negative. So that's a self-identity that really kind of related to kind of the culture or minority status.
Sure. So I'm kind of hearing two things. One is the pressure, the intense pressure that one would feel under the model minority stereotype. And the other is just the feeling of difference, of separation, and especially in middle school, high school. They do not want to be different. They want to blend. They want to be just like their peers and have that full acceptance because peer approval is everything for a while.
That's right. That's right. Mm-hmm.
Right.
When they are not, they're different. They decrease their self-esteem, especially if the children are being bullied. And there are data has shown that Asian American kids are bullying. We had a conference actually on anti-bullying in 2018 because of the need that the community needs. They bully a lot, especially right now during the COVID. So that's another factor as well. They're bullied because they look different, or their food is different. The kids can be mean in nowadays. It seems like the bullying is accepted from from the current political environment, right? So that is very, very damaging. Like I shared with you earlier that my youngest, my number 5, was in high school, in a local high school, and in February, and one of her friends started to cough. And then the teacher started mocking her and say coronavirus. That was back in February.
Wow.
So, I mean, those kind of behavior, those kind of behavior just really, can you imagine what it did to the child, even in high school? So I asked her, what did she say? And she said nothing. Again, model minority is supposed to be obedient, say nothing, even though you're being bullied, or even though you're being profiled.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That, yeah, I can imagine that would have burned a young person to the core. That there are just so many layers to that, having the
Yeah,
figure
mm-hmm.
ridicule a person on a topic that has literal global proportions. That's very cruel. So, any teachers listening to our broadcast tonight, please take that in and advocate for all of your minority students, but your Chinese American students in particular, around COVID-19 topics. We don't allow bullying. That's a huge impact on kids' mental health. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. I've read a little bit about that, mostly about adult situations. You don't always think about how it's filtering down to the kids. And I think it does filter down to children more than we realize. The awareness of current events and twisting them, having that become part of the social dynamic in ways that are not always helpful. In fact, very destructive.
Very destructive, because the children model the behavior of the adults. Mm-hmm. When, it seems very acceptable calling Chinese virus, Kung Fu virus, they associated with Chinese, and that has been increasingly increasing number of racism against Chinese American and Asian Americans during the pandemic. Because of the bullying, because of the name calling, it is, to me, it's just a sensitivity and kindness. You don't call names to no one. You just don't do that, especially to children. They internalize it,
Mm-hmm.
and then they actually get physical attacks, assault. All ages, even like 85-year-old grandmother in New York City, but the young adults that we have there's a website set up. It's called the AAPI hate, AAPI stop AAPI hate. But anyway, so 8 in 10 AAPI youth express anger over current anti-Asian sentiment.
Right. Well, I see a note in our chat box that I want to draw your attention to. Lily, I'm so sorry for all that you're going through during COVID-19 with bullying. I admire you for speaking out, your courage and your bravery. So I echo that. It's not easy to be the one who might have a target on your back, and it's really important to speak up. And those of us who can be allies, let's take that role very seriously, because sometimes it's easier for us to step in. It's easy for us to make the statement. So let's take that responsibility very seriously.
Thank you.
All right. So moving right along, tell me, you sort of touched on this, but maybe there's more that you can add. Tell me about stigma surrounding mental illness within the Chinese American community. What does that look like?
I think we had a webinar last Thursday, and the very powerful testimony of Sandy Chen. I think that her example and her testimony was really described the stigma, the issue of stigma, just so in a way that is so powerful, also very, very sad. So her story was that my student, if I were a teacher, I would say, student, can you like answer this question? I would love to do that. But anyway, so Sandy attempted suicide in 8th grade, the first time. And I didn't know it was that time or the later times. Her parents did not take her to the hospital until 8 hours later, after she became unconscious, because her parents feel ashamed because of the stigma. She almost lost her life.
Mm.
So when she was hospitalized, the doctor said that she needed to have a liver transplant because has damaged her liver that much, but she was miraculously recover. So that's what stigma does to anyone who with mental illness. Stigma is especially high in our community is because, like I said, lack of knowledge. Sandy had no idea. I think it was eighth grade what mental illness is until she was admitted. She said the only thing she knew about is watching a movie, some character on a movie. No idea, neither her parents. So, and then we are also, again, I don't want to generalize, to any culture, but there is as a group aggregate, Chinese culture is more about family. It's very much about family. There's a good side of family, supporting family, very close. But at the same time, if anything that is bad happen, also is not individual, it affects the family. Like for Sandy, she had a mental illness. They didn't know what it was. And it not only shames, the stigmas against Sandy, against the entire family. So her family feels ashamed as a family. So, and then it's all about, family togetherness. And also the bad things happen, we gotta hold it down, and we don't talk about it so that we will save, saving face. That's exactly what Sandy said.
Mm.
So stigma also means, basically, I think that stigma costs lives.
Mm. That's a very powerful conclusion and an accurate one, unfortunately. It
Mm-hmm.
does. Stigma and discrimination, definitely. They cost lives, they cost careers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for that summary.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me, what do you say to Chinese American young folks who are struggling today, who don't have support around them?
Mm-hmm. I wish I had a good answer. I think it is a mental illness is really tough. There's so many social determinants contribute to mental health, right? Or mental well-being, or and mental awareness. I think the first thing that anyone who suffers needs to know, it is okay. It is okay that you don't feel good. Just like it is okay to have hypertension, diabetes, it is okay that your brain, has an illness. It's no more, no less. You have broken arms, you go to the ER to get fixed. If you have your brain doesn't work well, or because of thinking process, because of depression, because anxiety, you go get help. It is okay. So secondly, I would say, go to talk to someone that you trust. I hope the parents out there that will listen to your children without judgment. Just listen. I think that's the biggest take-home message we try to educate the parents. It is difficult because the culture, because of lack of knowledge, it is very difficult. But I think one of the biggest, a barrier is because of the communication between the parents and children. They don't want to talk to their parents about it because they don't feel like they understand, they listen.
Mm.
So I will encourage that talk to your school counselor, talk to your friends, talk to your parents. However, if you have any suicidal thoughts, any thoughts harming yourself, you have to call 911. You have to get a professional help right away.
Mm-hmm.
And the professionals will be the school counselors who are licensed, right? And I'll just talk to the, if you talk to, depends on the age too, right? But I think that that is it is also unfortunately, it is one of the symptoms, of depression, but you need to get help right away. Call the helpline, like NAMI has a helpline too, right? So you can, if you have any students or, Asian American or any students, you need to get help right away, go to the emergency right away. But, I think that we just, as a community, I think we just all need to increase the awareness that is mental illness is very, very common, very common. Like over, I don't want to cite any data because I didn't have any citation, but that a lot of children and a lot of college kids suffer from mental illness, and it is okay. But it's okay to have mental illness. It just need to get help. Don't suffer alone and silent. Speak up.
That's right. That's right. I know in mental health first aid, the statistic they cite is about 18%. 1 in 5 people experiences symptoms of a mental illness in the US in any given year. That's the one statistic that I've always got in my pocket. But it is, everybody knows somebody, and it's human. We're all here to help each other. Everyone needs help sometimes, so let's be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And I see a question in the chat box asking for clarification. Could she elaborate? Lily, could you please elaborate on the story about the liver transplant? I believe that was Sandy. The listener missed something.
Because she overdosed, so the medication really damaged the liver, that the doctor thought that she needed to have a liver transplant, but she recovered because she was still young, so she didn't need to have a liver transplant.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, we have so many Sandy stories. In May, we lost in May, in the city I used to live in, Chicago, Naperville, we lost a 6th grader, 12-year-old to suicide. It was just really, really sad. And the parent, I talked to the mom, and she talked to other people too, and it was just really sad that it could happen to anyone, but I don't think that the parents understood what her daughter was going through, not enough at least. So a lot of early signs or things that it was very they just didn't know. Yeah.
That is very heartbreaking.
Yeah. So that's where, again, back to your question about how we have achieved or we have done, is that so many lives could have been saved. That if everybody could be educated just a little bit more about mental illness, especially in our community. That's why with all the educational webinars, we recorded, edited, and translate them. And so that we hope that people can hear more, and then we have expert. But again, today I speak as a mom and a community leader. I'm not a licensed healthcare professional. I mean, a mental health professionals, right? So I speak as a community person and also a nurse, but I'm not a licensed professionals. So you get professional advice, you need to go to a primary doctor, get a licensed professional. That's a professional help, not for me.
Well, that's what we're about at NAMI. We're sort of the street smarts of mental illness. We're the
That's right.
We're the grassroots.
Yeah,
so you're exactly. A perfect fit.
Yeah.
So we're almost at our halfway mark. I'll just ask one last question. What gives you hope?
Nowadays it is this question, I think, comes up more and more. It's kind of very depressing.
Mm,
Um, the entire environment and political, social, and also comes down to mental illness. But I think that uh, one must have hope. Otherwise, we probably, there's like a no point of living, right? So I think my source of hope is definitely, I think my faith,
mm,
and then that are depending on God to provide every day, and also give me enough strength, courage, and wisdom to live. Sometimes that's what I told my children: live hour by hour. You
mhm,
cannot worry too much about tomorrow, but live today to the fullest, and to see um, how can you help
mhm,
others, and how many more people you can help, and how many um, people's life can be changed, because of you, not despite of you.
mhm. Yeah, that was a very succinct answer, and there was so much good stuff in it. The power of faith, the power of helping others. I think I've said this the last 3 weeks on Thursdays with NAMI, but I find hope in the people around me. If I read the newspapers,
Yeah,
not uplifting.
yeah,
But
yeah,
the people in our networks, the people in our communities who are doing good things, they
yeah,
are
yeah,
inspiring.
yeah. I think so too. I think that's really important. I'm just really inspired also by, like I said, the kindness of people, the colleagues I work with. The NCC is just a great place to work.
Mm,
And also the colleagues, and I know that some of you are there, and we have a great new chair, and the students too. They're so resilient, and I really love them.
mm. Well, that's a wonderful note to end our interview on.
Mm-hmm.
And there are notes in the chat box about folks in California who are doing similar work to you, Lily, if you want to check that out. But right now, we're going to wrap up the interview portion of the show. A lot of accolades in the chat box for you too, Lily, so thank you for being here. Before we move to our video of the week, I want to give a big shout out to those working behind the scenes. We've got our fabulous tech intern, as always, Eddie Simmons. So thank you, Eddie, for being here. And we've got Gail Pruitt, our fantastic office assistant, who's also a psychiatric nurse. We were very lucky to get Gail's level of expertise in our office. And of course, again, I want to thank Lily Cheng for sharing her time and your story with us tonight. All right, so now this video is fantastic. It's a clip from Breaking the Silence, which Lily created for her team's grant application to the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation Clinical Scholar Program. I think you're going to really enjoy it, and I'm going to pull it up in just one moment. I want to make sure I share the sound so that you get the full benefit of this video. All right, let's check this out.
Sandy and her parents exemplify our wicked problem and one of our community's greatest strengths, family.
For a really long time, I didn't feel comfortable talking to my parents about my mental health because I felt like it was something they would not understand. The first time I attempted suicide, I was not taken to the hospital until 8 hours later because my parents were ashamed of what I had done. If that had happened later on down the road, I would not be here today. I think reaching out for help is one of the best things I could have done because it truly saved my life.
当我们得知 Sandy 患上这个抑郁症状呢，整个家庭就好像遭了一场灾难一样，犹如那个大难临头。我们开始也自怨自艾、自暴自弃，想不通、想不明白，为什么我们那么优秀的女儿她会患上这个忧郁症？通过几年时间，我们内心的苦苦的挣扎，我们互相鼓励，我们互相去多去家庭成员里面多沟通。后来我们慢慢就悟出了一些道理来。一个的话呢，当出现了小孩发生这个抑郁症的话呢，不要去埋怨，要多鼓励他，多跟他沟通，多给他爱， 多去了解他的内心的想法。第二方面的话呢，就积极跟外界去联系，要去寻找一些相关的这些专家医生给他做心理辅导，还要和他的同学、他的家庭成员，每一个家庭成员、以及老师都要去跟他们沟通，勇敢的把小孩的这个患病的这个过程跟他们解释，争取他们的支持。
They're known.
I just love the body language. I love the beautiful family, and I appreciate their courage for being part of that video. Yeah, so thank you for sharing that with us, Lily.
Yes, Sandy has been incredible. She has been to all our webinar as a panelist, and her courage and also her compassion to other people, that her willingness to help, just like anytime, every time. She just said, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share. And her parents has really turned around, just very powerful what education can do to this family. It's really, really cool to see. We hope that, yeah, so there's a hope, right?
That's right. There's hope there.
Yeah.
And I loved his comments. So I'm seeing a comment. Someone did not see the video. Could anyone see the video? The comment in the chat box. Were you able to see it, Lily? Okay.
I was able to see it.
Okay, wonderful. So I'm sorry for the person that didn't get to experience that, but I'm so glad that it worked out for the most part. That always gives me a little scare.
Mm-hmm.
All right, now we're going to take questions from our virtual studio audience. If you're new to Zoom, you want to look on the center, kind of bottom left of your screen. There's a Q&A icon. You type your question there and it will magically come to Lily and myself. I see we have one question lined up already.
Mm-hmm.
There's an unhelpful tendency in America to lump all Asian cultures, South Asian, Chinese, Japanese, Korean, etc., into one monolithic group, as if there's no difference between someone being from Calcutta or Beijing. How might that contribute to the difficulty of kids getting the mental health treatment that they need? Good question from Gary.
Yeah, I think that is a very good question. I think that as I shared earlier before the show, I think it really there's several issues or several discussion points, I should say. One is that I think a culture, and it is something that each individual to identify with, right? I can be a Chinese American, but a lot of my thinking ways may be very Irish, right? So even though I don't like Irish, maybe you never know. I might like Irish food or Italian food more than Chinese food, or my thinking. But so it's someone to identify with. It's not something that they are being perceived as, no matter who. So that is individual identity. I think that is they chose to be, or they identify with. So when we clump everybody, even Chinese American, there's a South Asian, you're right, Indian American, Korean American, all that. So there are these, we always need to keep in mind that individualism, or individual differences, I should say, individual differences, and just treat everybody as a unique individual, regardless of color, culture, ethnicity, whatnot. So we should treat everybody. So then within that culture, there are cultural norms. Like I said, in the Chinese culture, it's more family. They, as a unit, is supposed to individual. And then there are some family traditions. We celebrate some holidays or some customs, and that we do as a custom. And then the second issue is about socioeconomic status. I alluded earlier before that there's a vast difference in terms of economic status among this Asian group. So I think like South Asian, and South Asian groups, particularly like Hmong and from Vietnam, and they are at their socioeconomic. I wish I have data, but I didn't prepare because I thought just a talk, so I didn't have a slides or anything like that. They're on the bottom of the socioeconomic status, in the United States, the Asian group, the Asian Americans, the Japanese and Chinese and Indian, they're on the top, but South Asian on the bottom. So I, even within the Chinese, community, like I said, there are working class Chinese family as well that they need to be served and they need to get more help that they should. And then I think of, I think these are the two things that I think that comes to my mind. I don't know if that answers your question.
I think you did a good job of speaking to it. It is hard to get culturally competent assistance, and there are big differences. So I think that came through.
Yeah, and then another thing I would say is that the language requirement. Even in China, there's a 56 minorities. Like I'm Chinese and I speak Cantonese. People who don't understand Cantonese, they don't understand it. Like people who Mandarin, Cantonese, very different language. People don't understand each other. If you either if you're Cantonese and if people don't understand Cantonese, if they're Chinese, they're Chinese, doesn't mean they understand Cantonese. So the language support is very important that pose access to care issues, because there's a vast differences in languages. I think that's another thing I want to add to that.
That's huge. If you can't communicate with someone, it's awfully hard to get help. So a lot of moving pieces here, a lot of moving parts.
Yeah.
But we're going to keep having these conversations and finding the people who know people and finding the resources, are making our good faith efforts.
And then I guess one more thing I want to mention is that, because you were talking about serving Asian American, and I think another thing is that we need to know that it is very challenging to find bilingual speaking healthcare providers. However, everybody, I think, can be trained on culture competency and also culture humility. I was a home health nurse for many years. I always will say, my Chinese elderlies, like a lot of my work actually is related to translation, to the doctors, the nurses, and also the phone bills, the electrical bills, and how to talk to the building managers, homemaker companies, and all that. So I wanted to say that I always said that I would rather, the Chinese seniors would rather have a compassionate, caring physical therapist, any healthcare provider over someone who understand their language but who don't care. You know what I mean? So language is a huge component to access care, but compassion and caring, even not more, just as important. You can still provide compassion and patient-centered care if you really care enough. There's a Google phone, there's different kind of things, but so that's what I also wanted to add.
That's an excellent point. Words take you so far, but there's so much that can be conveyed with body language and nonverbals that can build trust. Noticing a gentleness of spirit is a very powerful thing.
Yeah, nonverbal. Yep.
So there's a question in the chat box again. Are there adequate language translation services in North Carolina?
That's a great question. Because I'm new to the area, I am not sure. But generally speaking, I would say in the bigger hospital, they have more resources. They probably like a Duke, or I would say UNC Chapel Hill. I'm sure that I think that they will have a language support. But to the smaller practices, I think it might not. And also, chancellor is, the skill set is very in high demand, especially like Cantonese speaking. I was joking that I should probably be a translator, so with being a nurse, that I probably get paid a lot more. But anyway, like in Chicago, I know the translator companies that they charge like $170 an hour for certain languages, So, but overall speaking, because U.S. is is becoming so diverse and minority groups is increasing by, I think, 2043, minorities will become a majority.
Right.
2043. So, you know, this is just going to be the fact. And how are we going to meet the demographic changes, you know? So this is something that resources are always an issue, but how are we going to still, we need to serve these people who are diverse, who are language barriers. That's going to be very challenging. I think finding out the solutions, how do you provide care, culturally competent care.
Right. Well, one thing that may continue to help us is technology.
Yeah.
You don't have to have an interpreter in your town or in your neighborhood. At least you can reach them
Yeah.
virtually, and sometimes that's helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully we'll find solutions.
Yeah. So another thing I want to say though is that translation is a very, like, even though I was joking that I wish I can be a translator, but I don't want to be. You know, it is very difficult because there are some parts of the language you just can't like Google and translate directly. There's some words or meanings that you can't directly translate, you know. So lost in translation, really, like literally, you can be lost in translation, a lot of meanings, especially when you try to translate some important like pre-op instructions, medications, very, very complicated, you know, and stuff. So I wouldn't be wanted to like being in that position to be translated. Really need to be specially trained. So what I'm saying is that still, even though you can, you know, have a translator, but, you know, other than compassion and cultural competency, also the whole thing that when we teach in Nursing Institute, the critical thinking, you know, is like, just can't assume, oh, you got a translator, the patient should be fine, right? There's so many factors in terms of education and learning, let alone someone who has a language barrier. You can't just say, I read it to them, they understand. Then you add it to an extra layer of language barrier that's even more challenging. So.
Very good, right. So we've got another question in the Q&A box, and I'd encourage people to put your questions in the Q&A box. If you type something into the chat box, because the chat box scrolls, your question could be lost. It could be float way up to the top and I might not find it. But here's one. In the Hispanic Latin culture, we go through the same type of clumping, and meaning everyone's under an umbrella, even though cultures are very different. This is why cultural competence and consideration is so important. Stereotypes are evident in every race, and just being sensitive to that would be appreciated.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. And that does sound, it rings true with what you were saying earlier, Lily, that the kindness and the gentleness of spirit that sometimes can trump the language barrier. All right. Do we have other questions for Lily? I see some comments. Lily, you are a wealth of knowledge and experience. I agree with the comment that language, compassion, and understanding are so important. You are amazing.
Oh, that is so kind. I always felt like sometimes, you know, normally I really don't like to speak, actually, believe it or not. I always like to have other people, I felt like they probably know, just because it is really hard sometimes to cover everything. I don't, especially comes down in culture, it is so complex. You know, I was always worried that, you know, I say something, it might not be totally objective, or it can be insensitive to others. It is really difficult, but that's very kind of you. I hope that I try. So, because each individual is so different, and each culture is so different, but, you know.
Well, you're speaking from the heart, and you're telling us some wonderful things about your story, and you do have a lot of knowledge based on your field, community mental health, all the young people that you've assisted. So there's a lot there that we're benefiting from.
Thank you. I'm learning, you know, every day too. It is a lifelong process. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to give you a few more minutes to ask questions of Lily Chen. We've got a wonderful resource here tonight. So for myself, I'll ask, are there any stories, of course, we've got Sandy. Are there any stories that stand out in particular as examples of someone overcoming stigma or?
Yeah. How about I will share another story about stigma, not stigma, how culture plays a part in terms of mental illness or stress. So just recently, one of family friend's daughter, who is a graduate student, and she's a strong advocate for mental health, and she had to go back to China to care for her mother who has a stroke, but basically has a lost brain function that had no hope to recover, but it's such a very, very difficult situation. But she, as a daughter, she quit school, she put a school on hold and flew back to care for her mother, and her father was there too. So she felt the family responsibility. That's very much part of the culture. Your children, take care of the parents. I was very, very moved. I know that some of my kids probably would do that. I hope anyway. So I can't assume, of course, but I hope that some of the children will do that. So I was very moved by her care for her mom. And so she flew back, was there for months and months. And she felt, quite hopeless in her mom's situation. But yet she didn't feel that she could leave, because that will be not the expectation of a child, right? So you're supposed to do that. And to the point that she became suicidal.
Oh my.
She felt so trapped, with that expectation. It may be just self-imposed, I'm not sure, right? So maybe just self-imposed, but did you see how the culture expectations, so maybe it's from the family members, maybe is, whatever. But that conflict within her, I would say, in like a maybe non-Chinese culture, or you need to go back to school, you need to take care of yourself, blah, blah, blah. So, but that is I'm not surprised, with this kind of situation that I have seen, like my own family member, not to that extent, but it's really kind of you feel trapped in that, kind of expectations, like sort of related to model minority myth.
Sure, trapped in a role. I was just at a suicide prevention training this afternoon, and one of the warning signs or vulnerabilities is feeling trapped. So that squares exactly with what you're saying.
Yeah, you're just hopeless. Basically, you don't have hope. You don't see any hope, that you don't have a choice.
Exactly. All right, so we've got a Q&A question. There's a high correlation between kids who are LGBTQ and suicide in the African American community. Is there evidence of that kind of correlation with sexuality in the Chinese American community with suicide and mental health?
That's huge topic again. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that, again, the culture-wise, is even the LGBT community had a highest suicide because of stigma, double stigma, right? Mental illness. And then if you take that into a Chinese culture, I can say for sure, because again, is even extra layer of stigma, because they're not being understood or accepted. And it was one of our partnering organization that we apply for. So we work together anyway. Massachusetts General Hospital Center for Cross-Cultural, the center, I'm so sorry, that they did a webinar on LGBT community and mental illness in Asian American community. And the need is huge. And I know that they are stigmatized and I would say probably more so in our culture. This is just a very personal, anecdotal. Yeah, but definitely, just because again, like before I even came to the United States, there wasn't, at least I didn't know, I wasn't aware of any these, LGBT individuals in my life or heard about it even. I didn't hear about it at all. So yeah, but they are the most vulnerable and absolutely. Mhm.
Right. I agree with you. I think that's a universal challenge. And
Yeah.
this is a good time for me to point out we've got a new young adult connection recovery support group. It's a NAMI program just for young adults with LGBTQ status. So if you're part of that community and you have any kind of mental health challenge, we would love to have you join our connection group. And we are meeting on the first Sunday at 6 p.m. And then also on the third Tuesday. I'm looking at my phone to make sure I'm giving you correct information. The first Sunday, the third Tuesday. And you can Google that, NAMI LGBTQ Virtual Support Group, or you can go to nami-wake.org. And we would love to see you there.
That is so awesome. Yeah, that's why NAMI has an experience. Actually, Jessica Jones, and she was the student SNA president and helped organize, coordinator for the last webinar. And she has mentioned that the next webinar, NCCU, we may want to focus on that population, because I think NCCU has a good LGBT group. So I did see a question on the chat box from Alex Ross. Do you want me to answer that? Do you have time?
Oh, please, we've got till 8:30. Go ahead.
Yeah, so Alex, your question is, did I struggle with mental illness when I was growing up? So I don't think so. However, I think that I didn't think that I struggled with mental illness. But however, I don't think as Chinese Americans, you have to understand the China's political environment. It was a communist country, everybody knows that. So I've been through a lot of like a trauma, not as much as probably average people, because how do you define average? So I hate that. But anyway, take it back. So we experienced a lot of trauma in that my dad was persecuted by, not persecuted, just punished, the political struggle. And I remember that when I was in elementary school or junior high, that I saw my dad was taken away by some people to a house arrest, for 2 months. So we were only allowed to visit him once a month. Then there were like my neighbor, like a next door, my dad's age, because of political struggle, and he committed suicide, but my mom and dad didn't tell me about it. And then my house was like one time I couldn't remember, I was 10 or 11, they came to my house to what's the word? Like they, plainclothes police, basically, from where my dad works. My dad works in the Air Force, so they are constant political struggles. So I witnessed the people came into my house to flip the mattress over, seeing there's any like documents in the mattress and all that. I was like 10 or 11, so I think of these kind of childhood trauma, I'm sure that has effect on my mental health that I probably didn't realize, as a child, because, nobody talks about. And then as a generation, to my generation, because of cultural revolution and also the anti-right wing, this political turmoils one after another, I think our generation really has been traumatized by this. I think the saving grace for me was that we came from Canton, so we are not as affected as those cities in northern part of China, like Beijing. We are considered as the most democratic state, in the southern, right next to Hong Kong. So that's one thing. And the second is that I was a little bit younger, like people who were like 5 or 6 older, like a little bit older, they were sent to the countryside. They were getting re-education, they were, separate from their family. So there's a lot of this. So therefore, I would say our entire generation that have been really traumatized by the political environment in China when we're growing up. So you know the mental health, that's a huge risk factor, the environmental and political, right? So, and the plus nobody get help. So I would say I probably were like some other people didn't know how to deal with, like I talk a lot, which is another saving grace. I just talk about it, you know. And then, but some people will internalize it and they don't talk about it. It didn't help. They didn't see help. So I will say those unsolved conflict and trauma, they never been dealt with, and has a huge effect on their mental health, you know, consciously or subconsciously. That's my assumption.
Thank you for your courage. That is a lot to go through, and it's an education for all of us here, I'm sure, to hear your story and to put ourselves in your shoes as someone who has been through so much upheaval. I'm so glad you're here to open our eyes and help us understand a little bit more about your story, and probably the story of many people in our lives that, you know, we just don't know as deeply. So thank you for sharing that with us. And thank you for answering the question. I've never had a viewer ask, have you had mental health challenges of the guest? And I wasn't sure.
Yeah. But you know what, see, mental health is a continuum, right? So absolutely, I think that I'm getting a therapist, I'm seeing a therapist because, you know, I want to get professional help, and getting a best friend who listens to you all the time, right? So I think these are all prevented, you know. I would say, you know, I'm stressed out, you know, that would be secondary prevention, like students, right? We talk about it, but it could be primary too. I think it's great. So if you ever, I think being a student, nursing student, I think everybody gets some help. I think it's so stressful, right? So, and especially if you have mental health, it's just a continuum. I think go get help if you need, and don't suffer alone in silence, and go help. There's a help there for all of us, and for students, or for youth, you know, Chinese American youth, or parents or students, and it's okay.
That's right. It's okay to get help. It's okay to take care of ourselves, and it's okay to talk.
It's not a sign of weakness at all. It's a sign of, I think, wisdom and courage, I would say.
Exactly. It's a sign of strength. I think this leads nicely into our next question. What is the most important tool for you for self-care?
Oh, yeah, I think that I mentioned that I think it's my faith, and then also is just general things, you know, because my mom, again, is very cultural, right? My mom is a big exercise person. She's 85 and she bikes and she walks or runs, you know, all that. So I'm kind of, you know, doing that too. So I love outdoors. I bike, swim, and run and walk, not running as much. And so I think that's really important. I just absolutely love fresh air. I think that oxygen just has something to do with. So I'm on my deck working all the time, you know, so getting the fresh air. And then also I think that, you know, family is very important. I think that gives me a strength and source of support. Like the kids, like my husband, oh, I'll cook, or they move the table for me because I said, I don't want people to, you know, see my bed. So anyway, move the table so that we can have like just a wall. So anyway, and you know, friend, I think talking to friends are very important. So it was a little tough for me to move here, like 2 years, and the COVID, you really can't see, but in, you know, doing something you're passionate about, I think that give you some purpose and a hope as well. You know, I think that's important.
Right. Yeah. That having meaning in your life, having something, knowing you're making a difference.
Yeah. Another thing is, don't be too hard on yourself. And life is short. Just have self-compassion, have self-care. Yes, I screwed up. Sorry. I'll be better tomorrow. You know, just really have self-compassion. Yeah.
I've heard people put it this way: extend grace to yourself and others.
Yes.
I love that use.
Yes. Absolutely, absolutely.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
it is very easy, much easier to say than done, Peg. Yeah, I have to say. It's very, yeah,
Right
it's
there
very,
with you.
I know. It's like we're asking for forgiveness every day, like every minute.
Right, right. I use a mindfulness technique where you label your thoughts. That is
Yeah,
a
yeah,
judgment.
yeah,
That is a judgment. And
yeah.
I'm sort of like on repeat all day long. That was another judgment. That
Yeah,
was
yeah. I know, I know. Oh, it's horrible. Like last in the spring, I was teaching another class. I couldn't believe like what I was saying. I was so journal. Oh yeah, people from South, must be this. And then one student actually pointed out, well, Miss Chen, that was like pretty ignorant comment. I realized it right. I said, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize. I'm so sorry. Subconscious bias, it is just part of us. It is so easy. But again, this is a little bit off topic, sorry.
But no, I think that kind of transparency is how we can strengthen and grow as a community, because we all have,
Oh yeah.
we all
Oh,
have
yeah.
those moments.
Absolutely. Yeah. We all need to be vulnerable. Nobody's perfect, nobody, but you do need to at the same time realize that, and you got to move on.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. If we can just acknowledge and let that go and come back together in community, that's why we're here, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, a lot of thank yous, a lot of words like amazing and wonderful, and thank you going out to you in our chat box. So I want to thank you for being here. I'm not seeing more questions, and we're close to the end of our time. Lily, would you like to say anything additional? You're on mute, Lily.
No, I just want to thank everybody to be here to listen and to learn together. I really, really appreciate, especially to NAMI for inviting me, and Pac for your great, guidance and work, and for Gary and for Miss Pruitt. And you're amazing. You brought us all together. And my students, I know that you're there. Maybe you don't feel like being here, but you're here. Thank you so much. And you're great. And my colleagues, I saw Dr. Sanjaya. I didn't know like who else is there, but anyway, thank you. I think that we're all human beings. We have so many similarities, similar struggles. I think that by being transparent and share our struggles together, we can grow stronger as a community. We absolutely needed to continue to help each other, and so that until everybody, especially on something that it can be prevented completely, like a mental illness or suicide, right, is totally preventable. Yeah, thank you for being part of this journey together, everyone.
Well, I've been doing the show since April, and I haven't teared up at the end of the show before, but hey, there's always a first time for everything. Thank you for those beautiful comments. And I want to say thank you to our virtual studio audience. We've got a lot of very lovely comments in the chat box that are making my day. Stay tuned next week. We've got a guest who's near and dear to my heart. Her name is Vicki Adams Hill. She's been strong in the African American community and sharing her story for many years. I met her in Toledo, Ohio, when we were advocates together. And she's going to share her story. She's very charismatic, and I think you'll all enjoy her. Now, another 90 minutes has flown by. We're going to wrap up here. I'm going to do my silly tradition of saying, go wherever you need to go, do wherever you need to do to stay safe. Keep an eye on the ones you love. And thank you again for being here with us tonight. I appreciate you all. All right.
Bye-bye. Thanks again, Pat. Good night. Good night, everyone.
All right. Have a wonderful evening. Be safe, everyone.